Now, there was a fella, he'd married a girl. Her name was Lizzie. His name was Lassiter, I believe it was. Lassiter, how did I say that? Lazier, thank you. I always have a problem with that, so when I tell the story, I just refer to him as L.A.
Yeah.
And he came to Texas from Arkansas, and he married a slave. Her name was Elizabeth. And that's where the story of Lizzie comes from. It is believed that Lizzie had lived in this part of Texas for a long, long time. And when she lived in this part of Texas for a long, long time, she actually found herself as part of the Underground Railroad of Texas, where the people would pass through here. Now, when they were passing through here, they were on their way toward a small town going that way towards Seminole. You would go through Mingus. You know, how many know where Mingus is? Okay. You're going to Abilene Christian College. You go that way. And then there's a small town that they call Seminole. Now, when you got into Seminole, once you made it to Seminole, there was a possibility you would come across the two conductors of the Underground Railroad that took you through the west into Saltillo. And they were two black Seminole Indians. Two black Seminole Indians. One was named John Horse. John Horse had actually led the exodus out of Florida into Texas. And the other one was a war chief called Wildcat. And they would actually take you because they spoke the language of the Apache, Comanche, and Cherokee. They had learned the languages they had come across. They tried to make Texas their home, but when Texas became a state and slavery became legal again, all of a sudden, the slavery that they had fled Florida into Texas to escape had followed them to Texas. And now, along that Texas-Mexico border. Matter of fact, the last known settlement of the black Seminole Indians in America is in Bracketville, Texas. Bracketville, Texas is between San Antonio and Del Rio on I-10. I became interested in this part of the story when I was studying my heritage. I put my DNA out there and I was hoping I wanted some Africans in my blood. You can go and laugh. That's right, I wanted an African. I said, I'm gonna give you this DNA. I don't care how much money it takes. You're gonna find me an African. No, but they found Seminole Indians.
Did they?
I said, close enough. Close enough. And I didn't realize that until I got a chance to meet my father, because unfortunately for me, I never met my real father, my blood father, until I was 46 years old. And then that's when all of a sudden this aspect of my life began to open up and I began studying it. And it brought me all the way again back around to Lizzie. She had 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. One of them's name was John. They say that John was a precocious little kid. He actually helped out, according to the legend. The legend says that what would happen would be runaway slaves would come, and there was a cave that was right there on the water. And they say that that cave was indicative of a lot of places that you would go and you would hide back during the days of the runaway. You would go and you would hide in what was called a loo. What was called a loo. And so you would go to the loo and that would be where you would hide. Follow the Drinking Gourd was just one of the songs that they played. The children, you little guys, y'all actually got in on it too. That's right. There you go, for real. And so they got in on it too. Because they would sing little songs and things like that. There were little songs that they would sing that were message songs. Blankets would be hung up on clotheslines, and on these blankets would be codes. I have a picture of one called the Bear Cat. Not the Bear Cat. The Star Diamond. That was a code. Believe it or not, that code would tell you which way to go. But you had to know the key. If you didn't know the secret, it was just a funny looking thing. You had to know the key. And so there were these. If you're really interested in that kind of thing, you really want to find out, look up a book called Hidden in Plain View. and they call it the clothesline telegraph. She could send messages like that. And if little Bob came back and told her that it was, ooh, they out there, I seen one. You seen what? I seen a runaway. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. Don't you tell nobody you seen no runaway. Mm-hmm. One of the things to do to keep from getting caught would be they would let the children go out into the forest, and they would leave bundles of supplies out in the forest for the runaways traveling through this part of Texas to find. Believe it or not, we still do that here in America. If you ever go to Tucson, Arizona, walk out in the desert and you'll see bottles of water for those people trying to immigrate across the desert. We did the same thing. Right here. Miss Lizzie and little Bob. Now, Bob didn't stay a little boy all his life. He grew up. But when he was a little boy, they say that the small children, the slave children, actually sung little songs that would tell you. One of them is really, y'all know it. A lot of y'all sang it when y'all was kids. It goes like this: skip, skip, skip to Maloo, skip, skip, skip to Maloo, skip, skip, skip to Maloo, skip to Maloo, my darling. Well, a loo, like I was talking about that cave before, where that kind of water goes in and out, depending on whether it rained or not. It's kind of swampy and smelly and nasty, and don't nobody want to go up in there. That was a good place to hide. Skip, skip, skip to Maloo. Go hide in the loo. Now, they also sang that same song to warn you of danger. Yes, they did. Lost my partner, what'll I do? Lost my partner, what'll I do? Lost my partner, what'll I do? Skip to the loo, my darling. What that basically meant was, I've lost my partner. Very seldom did more than one conductor know, hardly any conductor knew the complete and total route of the path he would take. Because if they did, that meant that one man or one woman or one slip of the tongue could compromise the whole operation. So you very seldom worked in anything more than paths. The worst I could do was get you jacked up. Worst you could do is get me jacked up. You know what I'm saying? But that was all they was going to get, right? There you go. Well, I ain't mad at them. And so what ended up happening was, skip to the loo, my darling. Also, they would tell you who to look for. Lizzie and little Bob, they were shoe flies. What is a shoe fly? A shoe fly is a black that moved freely amongst the whites. Let's go to the third lyric of the song. Listen to the image. Fly in the sugar bowl, shoe, fly, shoe. Fly in the sugar bowl, shoe, fly, shoe. Fly in the sugar bowl, shoe, fly, shoe. Skip to Maloo, my darling. Hide, stay hidden until you see that little boy. He's your shoe fly. Fly in the sugar bowl, shoe, fly, shoe. Fly in the sugar bowl, shoe, fly, shoe. Fly in the sugar bowl, shoe, fly, shoe. Skip to Maloo, my darling. And look, and they did this. Then the Civil War came. Him and his mom was abandoned for a while by the Civil War. At the end of the Civil War, his daddy returned. When his daddy returned, he was an older young man by then. And he worked for his daddy. He drove sheep, raised livestock, and did what he could. And the part that's really amazing to me is that he drove sheep. Because see, right now in Texas, we see them big cattle ranches, they up on them horses, they riding like this here. When you drove sheep, you drove them by foot, you was on foot. Because you had to make them sheep move. Because sheep, the way they eat, they'll eat grass all the way till it gets almost to the bare ground, and they'll pull the roots out the ground. If you let the sheep stay in one spot too long, and grazed there too long, they will ruin the soil. That was one of the reasons the cattlemen and the sheepmen always got into it. Because after the sheep had come through, the grass wasn't no good for cattle. He was raising sheep. He herded sheep, which meant he did a lot of walking and a lot of yelling. Hurry up, y'all go, get out the way. I just want to see if y'all paying attention. So he herded sheep, you know. And so he herded sheep, and he worked it a long time. He worked it a long time doing that. And he managed to save a little of his money. And he bought 50 acres of bottomland. 50 acres of bottomland. Well, there was an argument. I've read it both places, but it was either 50 or 60 acres of good bottomland. By them tall cypress trees and them long creeks and things. But you know what was on that 50 acres of bottomland? That cave. That cave. Because the word had been passed out that if you got into that part of Texas and you needed help, look for Miss Elizabeth. Look for Miss Elizabeth. She'd help you out. And the family carried on that tradition because one of the things that led me to this area the very first time was an article in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram by a woman whose name was Mary Elizabeth Miles. She was driving through here and saw the land that used to belong, she said, in her family. Mary Elizabeth Miles. I was amazed. Right here in Texas, the Underground Railroad. Unos Estados Unidos de Brazos. Brazos is a Kickapoo Indian word meaning arms of God. That was one of the routes, was to follow the Brazos River. Frank Dobie wrote a book called Stories from the Brazos Bottoms. And most of those stories are about emancipation. J. Mason Brewer, another one. Frank Dobie, he was one of the well-known Texas folklorists, and Jason Brewer, he's called the Black Frank Dobie of Texas. Both wrote stories about traveling along the Brazos. He got to be a man. When he grew up, he was doing pretty good. He was raising horses, cattle, things like that, had him 50 acres of bottomland, and then something happened. Same thing that happens to all men. Sooner or later, we get lonely. We get lonely. He got lonely. And by the time this happened, we did a little math when I first got here, and we figured he had to be around 20 years old when he done this. Him and his homeboy was hanging out, right? They hanging out. What y'all gonna do? Man, you heard about the big party they having up in Bonham, Texas? What's going on? Man, they just ratified that 13th Amendment. They gonna have all kind of parties going on all over the I'm 15, the 15th Amendment. And it's gonna be up in February. We're going, oh yeah, man, we're going. So sure enough, man, they saved up their little money. Now the reason I say that they planned this trip, because from here to Bonham is almost 80 miles. This wasn't no hop on your horse, ride down there like you the Lone Ranger. This was a trip. Boy, I can see him right now getting clean. You know, old Western clean, you know. And boy, ride down the Bonham. Man, I can see him. Him and his best friend. They get down to Bonham, and that's when he sees her for the first time. Oh, yeah, her. Oh, yeah, huh. Y'all going, eee! Now, 10 years from now, y'all be like, yeah, me too. He embarrassed. Oh, yeah, don't tell me that. 10 years from now, you're going to be throwing them dimples on them girls. Oh, they like that one, okay? And that's where he met Alameda. Now, she was a nice girl. Now, if you look at those pictures, when you get a chance, go in there, look at the picture of Bob standing there. And he's kind of standing there, man, and he's got that wavy hair going, that big, thick mustache. Now, take about 40 years off that picture and make his hair dark, and he's all dark and handsome looking, you know? Uh-huh. Yeah, uh-huh. I can't imagine. And so I look at that picture, I say, he got it going on. I said, I bet you he was. And so they rode into Bonham. Now, when he rode into Bonham, I don't know how it happened, but some kind of way him and her met up, and they started talking. Now, he wasn't but 20 years old. And back in the old days, they had 2 or 3 ways you could court somebody. You had regular courting, and you had quick courting. Okay? Bob, he was really enticed with her. And, well, he did what they call plied his trough. He told her his intentions. But she was a good girl. First thing she told him, she said, you just can't be coming up here riding up to my house on your horses. Me and you going to be, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. When you come pick me up, you need to come pick me up in a 2-seat carriage. So Bob, being the obedient young man that he is, when he showed up again, he had him a buggy, and he took her for a ride. Man, they went riding and things like that. And, well, things was going along pretty good, but like I said, she was a good girl. She didn't stand for no fooling. I need you to come back and see me again. Well, somewhere in there, he invited her to go to meet his people. Now, she refused to go, unchaperoned. And she had met Bob's sister, Georgia. So she asked Georgetta to ride with them. So next thing you know, he come, he in that buggy, and it's him and his sister. They bring her down here, and that's the way it was done back then, all right and proper. Now, he done met Mama and everything. He done met the whole family. And it was then and only then that she consented to be his wife. And they became married. And they had 10 children. Say that with me. Everybody say 10. 10. Everybody go, oh no! I could, and I'm not gonna lie to you. I cannot remember all these kids' names. So I wrote them down. I can't even remember 10. 10. And let me see, here we go. I'm going to lay this right here. It was Jim, Alice, Fergie, Virgie, Artie, June, Emery, Jinx, Emma, and Hattie. Ain't them some names for you? Them some names for you. But you know what? They had 10 children. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. By now, he's starting to buy and acquire land. And this is where having 10 children kind of come in handy. By you acquiring and buying land, you got 10 children, they kind of come in handy because they can help around the farm. Now, raising the kids, Bob and Alameda were good parents. They were. They worked really hard, and they put their kids to work too. But there was a problem. And the problem was there was no school. There was no school for the kids, and there was also no church. Now, at first, they would actually take the kids all the way to Denton to school. And then the county in the state of Texas started doing one thing. They started providing money and fundings to establish and create what they called it a colored school. But the problem was, according to the regulation, was that the money was there, but they didn't have enough money to buy the land. So Bob donated the land. He donated the land for the school, and next thing you know, they have a school, and the school is called Walnut Grove. Everybody that's in this room drove by Walnut Grove Elementary. Now, trust me, it didn't look like that when Bob and them built it first. It was a one-room schoolhouse. It was a one-room schoolhouse, and they said that they found receipts for the school. And I think that they paid the teacher, one teacher got paid $25 a month to teach at that school. And that's where all the kids went. And I think that was his whole idea, was to have somewhere to get rid of those kids at least for a few hours every day. I mean, he had 10 kids. I'm still trying to get past that. But they all went to school there. They had teachers that would come in and stay for a little while. That part of the story is real close to me because my grandma did the same, my great-grandma did the same thing in Montgomery County. And when they took me to visit that schoolhouse, I could only imagine what Walnut Grove Schoolhouse looked like. It couldn't have been much different from that one. Because I'm going to tell you something. One of the problems that they did have at Walnut Grove, they didn't have running water. When time came for them to get out and get a drink of water, some of the boys would leave class early, go chase the cows away from the... They would go and chase the cows away from the drinking pot. And they would go out there. Now, you know, we didn't worry too much about germs back then, but they would do that. Same thing down there in Montgomery County. And then you had what was called a privy. Y'all know what a privy is? How many know what a privy is? Okay. For those of you that don't know what a privy is, that means that's a butchered up East Texas word for privacy. And they usually had one for the girls. The girls would always get to use the privy first. Boys, see that tree?
Yep.
That's right. For after recess, you have to ring the bell. Boys come running out the bushes. But that was the way it was back then. You made do. That was one of the reasons that Eugene, in his interview, he talked about how he never really felt a sense of racism. He never really felt a sense of racism, and it was because necessity made them all equal. They were all farmers. They were all scratching the dirt, trying to make a living, make something out of nothing. And they were stronger together than they were apart. The children in their memoirs talk often about interacting with people of other races. Every day. No big thing. Now, don't get me wrong. At the same time that I'm talking about these things was happening, if you want to look at what else was going on in America, they had just recently had, in Charleston, South Carolina, brought in the National Guard. Other incidents. All this took place in the 30s and 40s. There was a celebration in Tuskegee about the first year that there were no lynchings in America. Hooray! And in this one little spot out here in the Texas prairie was this family, led by very, very brave people. Walnut Grove School was a great school because everybody had to work in school. You brought what skills you had and you taught them. They eventually had to close Walnut Grove School because, believe it or not, without the Jones kids and one other black family from a place called The Hill in Grapevine, they were the only students there. And by law, by the time they got to high school, what we call junior high. I'm trying to think what they would call it now, but we used to call it junior high. By the time you got ready to go in junior high, they had to be moved to Fort Worth for school. But that was where they got their initial education. And a church. And a church. Bob was a church-going man. And he believed that his family should participate in church. And he thought that they needed a church. They didn't have a church in this era. And he didn't build, well, he built a church. And he opened the doors to it. And it was called Mount Carmel. Now, it's Mount Carmel in Dallas. And it's two or three Mount Carmels in Fort Worth. But Mount Carmel out in Southlake was built by the Jones family. He had a big old fine house too. It started out as a little house, but every time she had a baby, he'd add a room, you know. So next thing, and so you know, he's got this big, beautiful house with this fancy ornate porch and everything. He was a gracious man. Oh, now the church they had, Mount Carmel didn't just take off and start running. It wasn't like T.D. Jakes and nobody was in there. The first preacher they had was a regular fellow by the name of Lister out of Fort Worth. He came and helped establish him and his wife. They got a choir and everything together. But for the most part, it was those lay preachers that come and go, or what we used to call back in Houston circuit preachers. They come, they stay for a while, then they'd go on. They come, they stay for a while, and they go on. Church has always been a center of activity for the black community. And no different at Mount Carmel, because I believe it was Elnora and Hattie and their friend Betty Jean would teach Sunday school. They had a piano, but they had a problem. All three of them only knowed how to play one song. And the only thing they did was take turns going first, but you'd hear the same three songs every Sunday. But they was in there singing. They was in there singing. They would have church, they would have picnics, of what we call potlucks today. I still love a good church potluck. I mean, you go there and I'll never forget one time they had cheese on sale, and that government cheese was on sale back when I was growing up. The kid went to a potluck. There were 4 different kinds of macaroni and cheese there. It was macaroni and cheese with ham, macaroni and cheese with peas, macaroni and cheese with crushed cornflakes on top and baked. It was you could tell they had government cheese at the commodity house. And, you know, but church picnics, man, were fun. And they had church picnics at Mount Carmel. And then one harvest season, he decided to have a picnic for harvest. He had a picnic for harvest, and it became so popular until that picnic ran all the way well into the 1970s. And his two boys ran it. It was Jinx and, oh my God, let me see, hold on, let me check my notes. Who ran it? Oh, I was right, Jinx and Emery. Jinx and Emery. Now, Jinx and Emery were the two boys that was closest. They were the two baby boys. And when you got 10 kids, you know, you start having these little, whether you like it or not, you start having these little groups. I told you about the 3 girls and their friend that did the Sunday school and things like that. And then a couple of the older girls actually taught at the school. Jinx and Emery became friends when they was given some toys by their grandpa. And grandpa said, well, here, y'all gonna have to play with these together. So instead of fighting over them, they played with them together, and they became lifelong business partners and friends. They started their own business, followed their daddy's example, started their own business, a livestock show, an auction house right here. And then they kind of took over the picnic. They kind of took over the picnic when their dad and mom and them started getting a little old. The picnic became something that was looked forward to by everybody. Because it was a funny thing about this part of the country and the land owned it by the Joneses family and other families around here. White folks work for black folk work for white folks. A job was just a job. And when it came time to party, a party was just a party. And everybody was invited. Most of the time when they felt and faced racism, it was because they had went to the quote, quote, big city. Fort Worth, Dallas. But when they was home, they was home. Things kept going and happening in their life. The house burnt down, 1946. Some say it was a lightning strike, but I've read 2-3 different versions of it. At the time, Elnora and Luella, the wives of Emory and Jinx, opened up a restaurant. When they opened up the restaurant, they say it was the first integrated restaurant in the state of Texas. If I'm getting these names right, I'll double check before I leave and get it straight for you if I got it wrong. But they opened it up. Lula and Elnora, the wives of Emory and Jinx. And they opened it up, and when they opened it up, one of the things that had happened was, believe it or not, according to the legend, there was a book called the Green Book. The Green Book was a book that had a listing of places that African Americans could go and be served and not have to deal with racism and know it was safe. It was a safe place to go because traveling at that time wasn't very safe. So they opened up a restaurant. They opened up that restaurant, and most of the truckers that came through were men of color, black men. But every now and then, others would stop. They made no difference. Didn't think about it at all. There's a famous reflection in the memoir of where a black trucker came to the back door and asked for some food and if he could be served. And they told him, yeah, but only if you're willing to come through the front door. And that was the way they were. They didn't want to have a black restaurant, a white restaurant, an integrated restaurant. They just wanted a restaurant. They just wanted a restaurant. Oh, and they served good old-fashioned soul food. Good old-fashioned soul food, they served it. And I saw and I read a thing where they said that they didn't serve much barbecue because they didn't have the money to get a real good pit, and they wasn't going to disgrace the art of Texas barbecue by not getting it just right. They was a family. And the family that they were, I am amazed at that family. And believe it or not, I've worked on this story off and on, and you should have seen the looks on the faces of my audience when I told bits and pieces of this story in Coffeyville, Kansas, at the community college. I just wanted to let them know that we aren't all, people are so different. The word that was used in the documentary was colorblind. They were raised colorblind. They grew up colorblind, and they lived colorblind. Sometimes it's when we impose into our life these labels of race, age, culture, philosophy, and ideology. It's like what my man said about acid. Hate is like an acid. It'll destroy whatever you pour it on, but it also eats up the vessel it lives in. During my research, I saw no signs of hate in this family, other people around. And it makes me proud to say I live in this part of Texas. Because I grew up in Houston, in what they call Fifth Ward. I seen my fair share of racism. And to have a family like this exist through all that, from before the Civil War to now, is amazing. I want to thank you for allowing me these few minutes to share how I feel about this wonderful family and this beautiful place. Before it was over with, they said he owned it 2,000. They said at the peak, make sure I use the correct word, at the peak of his land ownership, it was close to 2,500 acres at the peak. A lot of that is underwater with Lake Grapevine now. But we still have this beautiful nature center. I just hate that we got a day like this, because I've already told, I say, when the weather get good, I'm gonna come out here, but I want the weather to be really good, where I can come in my shorts and y'all can laugh at my skinny legs and have a fun time and see the things, because I want to get down to the lake and see the lake and all that. I just want to really one day just come and walk and visit. It's a wonderful nature center. I want to, again, thank you. Thank you for allowing me today. Thank you very much.